Hey, John Gilroy here. Today, we have an explainer episode. Trellix will explain how to direct, respond to, and manage federal cyber threats. Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, the podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator in the virtual studio. Today, we have Craig Bowman, Senior Vice President, Global Sector at Trellix, Trellix. Craig, you ready to rock and roll here, buddy?
Hey, man, I'm ready to rock and roll. I was born ready. Let's do it.
Good. You know, I did a prep call with you, and of all the countries that came up, you talked about Ukraine. And I said, well, what's the differentiator? What has Trellix got that's different from the guy down the road? And you talked about Ukraine. So we got to open with this. I mean, this is a hot topic. So what's your involvement with those folks over there?
Yeah. So let's be clear. When I came, it was something that was handed to me. So the company's been doing it for a while. But even just before the invasion, the senior leadership at Trellix made the decision to invest in the security of Ukraine. And that came in the form of a pro bono project where we provide all of their technology to secure their environment. And we're talking about a lot, right? So every single one of our products across tens of thousands of endpoints, securing Ukraine against arguably, John, it is the most concentrated nation state attack in a wartime environment that's ever occurred in the history of the world.
Yeah.
And you're talking about China and mostly Russia, but Russia and China are attacking them with every new capability that they can create or think of across every one of their different modes of infrastructure. So, of course, military, right? I mean, that's the obvious, but it's also education. It's also citizen services. It's a Department of Energy, right? That's a big part of it. They're going after their energy grid. And so we're getting a first look into all of the attack vectors across every method of attack, whether it be email or endpoint or network detection. We're seeing the very best they have to throw at one of the highest priority targets that they have, which is the Ukrainian government. And that gives us some really interesting data and not only to be able to analyze, but then every new attack vector that comes out, every new 0-day, every new AI piece of malware that's now hitting, we immediately have a copy of that we put into our labs, and we can start taking it apart. We can take a look at what's coming up that's new. And man, I think that is just so crazy unique because there's no other company in the world that has that insight, right? We see the attacks happening in Ukraine. And let me just say that it used to be that it would be about 6 months between the time that we would see the attack in Ukraine to the time we would see that same attack vector here in the United States. So there was about a 6-month gap when we started doing this. And now what we've seen is that time has shrunk, depending on the attack vector, to 6 days, 6 hours, 6 seconds.
Wow.
So it depends on which attack vector, but they're using Ukraine as a testing ground to attack us here in the United States.
Great.
And that is just some cool stuff. I am so just lucky to be part of the project, for sure.
So, Craig, give me a handful. You know, let's say you're a federal leader listening to this podcast. I just want some clues about some of the trends you've seen that the federal CISO should be prepared for down the road.
Yeah, look, everybody is talking about AI. It was just in the news, I think, this month that AI broke some of the kernel stuff. I think that's what we're seeing as well. We could spend a whole podcast just on AI, but in November of 2025, we saw the disruption of a major cyber espionage campaign where attackers weaponized an AI coding agent. So the AI actually did 80, probably 90% of the hacking completely autonomously. It handled the lateral movement. It handled the account discovery, the exploitation. And, the human beings behind this, the human hackers, they literally were sitting back like in a supervisory role. And so I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a different level of polymorphic malware. And you can look specifically, like there's things like LameHug, which was used by Fancy Bear. And in LameHug, it literally uses AI to rewrite its own code in real time to evade detection. So, we simply can't fight an autonomous machine with a human being clicking through alerts. It doesn't happen. And so we have to start fighting AI with AI. And I think that's the conversation that everybody's having. And people are at different levels of comfort level. Like, do we want human on the wire? Do we want human out of the wire? Do we want humans as a supervisor? How far do we want to automate our response to this? But if we don't figure it out, human beings will not be able to respond to what's coming.
I did some research on your company this morning, and I stumbled on the phrase detonation chamber. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing for a technology company to talk about. So is this just a black? So what is a detonation chamber when you apply it to these cyber attacks?
Yeah. So I hear people argue that today's cyber specialists are basically just like what I call blast radius specialists. A blast radius is just trying to look. We know we're going to get owned in some fashion, so let's just contain the blast radius. Meaning, how much damage can be done? What's the risk to the business, and how do we limit that risk? That's why we see cyber insurance becoming so popular, because boards of directors are containing the risk with insurance. But you asked about detonation chamber, and I guess why should a CISO care about it? Because I would say because being a blast radius specialist is kind of a fancy way of just saying, you're the guy with the broom cleaning up the bomb after it went off.
Mm.
So for DoD, for intelligence community, for critical infrastructure, sovereignty, that is a total failure if you're broom sweeping after a bomb went off. You can't sweep after a bomb went off if it's classified information. So they require absolute prevention. And Trellix, for your listeners, for those of you that don't know us, we were the formation of the companies exceptionally well, which is McAfee Enterprise and FireEye, which was combined with Mandiant. Later, Mandiant was sold off to Google. So what you have in Trellix is two of the largest, oldest companies with the most amount of cyber data of any other company in the world. And so from that, the experience of the Mandiant and FireEye piece of that acquisition realized that they needed a way to go after zero-day exploits. So they built what we call IVX. It's our virtual execution engine. It is number one in the industry. Every single competitor we go against, we dominate. But when a nasty kind of unknown, let's say AI mutated file hits the network, we don't let it touch the agency's actual data. We snatch it up. We kind of drop it into this highly secure, isolated virtual detonation chamber, and we spin up tens, dozens, hundreds of perfectly mimicked systems in their environment, from their environment, and we can test what it does. We can look at what it breaks. We can look at what it tries to modify, and we can instantly create a defense against it. And so we kind of take the blast out of the blast radius worry for the most sensitive customers, which is, quite frankly, it's about 60% of Trellix's revenue comes from the highly contested, super sensitive, cannot fail environments. And maybe that's not right for every customer. Maybe every customer doesn't mind, hey, we're just going to mitigate risk with insurance, but our customers can't. And so we build these very hardened on-prem, in the cloud hybrid systems so that we get zero failure, as opposed to, hey, failure is okay and we'll mitigate with insurance.
Mythos, Mythos, has been bandied about here in the last couple months, and some cybersecurity professionals are kind of like just putting it off, and some people are worried about it. So I think the concept here that people are saying is that just because Mythos can detect a weakness or anomaly, that doesn't mean that it can actually act on it. And so finding a weakness and acting on it is kind of different. So is that the strength of the detonation chamber? What you can do is you can see a new attack and then find out exactly what it can do rather than just identifying it. Is that the second step here? Yes, now we know what it can do. Now, and prevention's got to be a step beyond awareness, I would think.
Yeah, John, good question. Now, I think that, look, and I don't have access to Mythos, so I will not, comment on what's in the code. I'll just give you just a generic, Mythos right now looks to me to be a very powerful engine for looking at software and environments to look for weaknesses, like pen testing your software. Detonation chamber NDR is very different. So it sits inside your network. Think about every time you have an OT, IT medical device that you can't put an endpoint software on, that simply you can't use CrowdStrike, you can't use even Trellix. If we have stuff, we have endpoint that we embed in OEM products, but not every OEM product has CrowdStrike or Trellix on the endpoint. And so when you have environments in which you can't secure every single device, you then have to have a network detection tool to look for stuff that it's not going to catch, that you're not going to catch in the environment. So that basically looks at all your traffic coming through, and it starts to sense whether or not there's something wrong with the data, and then it drops into the detonation chamber. And by the way, even if it's encrypted, which I could do a whole podcast on how we do that, so you don't have to necessarily break all your encryption to determine whether or not it belongs in the detonation chamber. But this is really critical because it's inline, which means it's not going to be, hey, we have to detect it and give it to Trellix. We can literally inspect inline the data that we need to put into the detonation chamber and then blow it up and see what happens.
I go to conferences all the time, and a trending phrase, as you well know, is Agentic AI. And Agentic AI may be wonderful in, Craig's Donuts in Chicago or something, but we're dealing with secure environments here.
Yeah.
And we're dancing around this term autonomous. You mentioned it earlier. Now, it's kind of like gasoline and matches. Okay, so you get agentic AI, you get autonomy, then you get secure networks. And what could possibly go wrong? It seems like this is a tough juggle. And so how do you address concerns about agentic AI in secure environments?
Yeah, look, this is the massive elephant in the room.
Yeah.
John, I am personally, like I'm a coder, I'm an engineer. I came out of the IC. And so even at home today, yesterday, I was, every night I'm on coding with different algorithms. Quick story. I just, my daughter had a test today, and so I took a screenshot of every one of her lesson plans, loaded it into AI, and I vibe coded a game for her to learn the material so that she'd be ready for the test today. And so last night she was playing the game. Literally, like, I'm living nothing but AI every single day. I'm spending over $1,000 a month personally for it. But this is the massive elephant in the room for public sector and for any customer where failure is not an option. Most of the commercial AI tools out there, like if you hear one of our competitors say agentic AI, it basically says, hey, we will build a tool in which we have an agent that has a set of tools. They will investigate your data that we have because we collect it, because we're your endpoint provider. And we do the same thing, right? We're doing exactly the same thing. But here's what we decided that was going to be different, is that in some of these really sensitive environments, they can't send their highly classified data out to a cloud to be processed.
Right.
That simply can't happen. And then number two is, if you have 5 or 6 different vendors, how do you run agentic AI against all the different vendors if their agentic AI is only looking at their own data, right? So pick any one of our competitors. They're running agentic AI. How do you as a SOC correlate using agentic AI between all of those different repositories? It's the same problem. You can't move the data. So this is what our mad scientists have done, is they have figured out that we, from some of our lineage, was every time we went in with Mandiant to do an investigation, Mandiant had to build connectors to every product that a customer had in their environment. So we already had 1,000 connectors to every product out there, including our competitors. So our mad scientists said, right, rather than move all the data to one location, which is costly, which breaks all kinds of sensitivity rules. We can actually use these connectors to actually take advantage of agentic AI on the data wherever it sits. We don't have to move the data. There's no cost of moving data and storing the data in order to run consolidated agentic AI. And we're the only company doing it on-prem, totally without the need of a cloud. So
yeah, that's
that is going to be the holy grail moving forward, is how do you leave the data where it is, run agentic AI across multiple cyber footprints, not have to send it to the cloud and incur all those cloud costs, and still get the benefit of discovering cybersecurity vulnerabilities in a contested environment. That's what Trellix is doing. People say, "Do we innovate?" Come take a look at the demo. You'll see how we innovate.
Yeah. And the demo is available at Trellix.com. Tom, I'll put that in the show notes. Now, I'm taking down notes, and I listen to podcasts about commercial enterprise software. And listened to one this week, and a gentleman said, this is hard. In a typical enterprise, they may have 78 different tools. And I said, 78? I mean, you just mentioned it. Instead of developing agentic AI, they may relabel a tool to something like that. I think this is going to be the untold story of who's on first, what's on second, how do you control what? There has to be some kind of repository for something, whether it's data or the tools or the environment. It's just. I think this is this whole tool sprawl is something that it's kind of under the radar. It's going to hit someone bad one of these days.
Yeah, John, I'm going to give you a prediction. I've been saying this now as much as I can say it. The tools that we're using today, and people smarter than me have said it, the actual tools are not what's valuable to a customer, right? The UI that we build, this company's got a better UI than yours. You haven't updated your UI and it still looks old. It looks like blank. That's not what customers are buying. Customers are not buying the UI. They're buying the data and how AI is going to make sense of the data in real time. That is the future of cyber. And so that's why I'm here at Trellix. I looked at the companies of who has the most amount of data across every vector: email, network, endpoint, cloud. There were only 3 companies in existence 20 some years ago. It was Microtrend, Symantec, and McAfee. So across every operating system, every endpoint, every vector, Trellix has that data. And so the future of AI is going to be dependent on who gets to Trellix's data. That's why I'm here.
I normally ask the crystal ball question now, but I'm going to switch things around because we're going to switch things around today because this is the explainer episode. So maybe you can dip into the vast knowledge that you have and maybe give us some details where Trellix technology detected a threat that maybe humans alone may not have been able to detect, and what can federal security leaders, what can they learn from this environment, this example of yours?
Yeah, there's so many. And one of the things I love to do is I feel a fish out of water if I'm in the office. I have to meet customers. So I go out and visit customers often, and I'll give you one, maybe two. But the big one was during the election, the presidential election. We got a call from one of our customers that they were under attack. And they had purchased what we call Helix, which is that tool I told you that was built FireEye, Mandiant, when they go in to do an IR, right? Yeah. To go all the 1,000 connections I told you about a few minutes ago. So they had just bought it, but it wasn't turned on. And so when I heard, the account manager called and said, hey, they're under attack, I put a whole team together. They didn't have any IR contract with us, no professional services contract, but they're an important customer. So I put a team together. Everybody jumped on a Zoom call. We're sharing screens. We're looking at what's going on. And Helix, that's the product, was not lighting up because the data wasn't coming from their perimeter. So a few minutes later, I figured out the code that would move the alerts that we needed from their boxes that weren't ours to Helix. And the moment Helix lit up, the moment you could see the screen, it lights up and it starts getting data. Within 40 minutes, Helix, with no human intervention, had fully mitigated the ongoing attack. It literally was taking the data and automatically creating rules and playbooks and executing what it was seeing against the attack. And of course, it takes a few minutes because the attackers are coming from thousands of IP addresses. So you've got to wait till all the different attacks come in so that you can write all the rules, but you're not doing anything. The team literally sat back and Helix took care of all the business and mitigated the attack for them. That was even before we've been applying the traditional agentic AI to our products. So just imagine how far we're going to come with this.
Yeah, that's great. Well, those are some fascinating stories. If you'd like to contact Craig, finally, someone's name easy to spell, CraigBowman on LinkedIn. I will put a link to your company in the show notes page. This is a interesting topic, and I think you're like a fighter that's been trained in the ring, then you're let loose on the streets. I mean, that the lessons from Ukraine have got to be so important to help federal leaders, maybe do some of these attacks. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Craig Bowman, Senior Vice President, Global Public Sector at Trellix, Trellix.